So in this tutorial, we're going to look over the marketing floor plan project that we're going to do in conjunction to the BOMA project that we're currently working on. So to gain access to the marketing server, you have to go to the M server, not the Z drive that we're currently using here on the left-hand side, but you're going to go into the M drive to get to this subset of folders. Now, you all should have access to this folder. In case you don't, just let me and Kelly Dorval know, and you should be able to gain access to it once IT sets it up for you. So once you're here in the marketing folders, you're going to go straight to the floor plan section. We only have access to this for the purposes of what we're doing. The rest of it remains confidential, so make sure that you're working within the floor plan folder. In the floor plan folder, you're going to see all the buildings identified by their property code. So make sure that you're using the property code index Excel that I provided to you that has all the property codes listed depending on which market you're in. So if you're in Southwestern, please make sure that you're looking at the Southwestern property codes. And if you're in Montreal, please look at Montreal codes, and the same goes for Ottawa. This folder is organized in a way that everything that you see currently here must be resolved first. So let's say a property 721, it's listed as not started. You see all these identification tags that are important because Kelly has already identified which properties have been started or need confirmation. If there's like an atypical unit that was left out in the audit, we'll look at that in depth as we go along. But you'll see here, if you scroll down, there's a folder called Completed Amy. So imagine this like a Russian doll of sorts. The properties that are in here, in this first folder, are more important in terms of they need clarification right away versus things that exist in the Completed Amy folder. As a property is completed through BOMA and the marketing audit and floor plan InDesign project, that property gets moved on to the next folder, okay? So from Completed Amy, you may also have properties that are in here. So 1181 is listed as branded, 1193 is listed as branded. And now once they've been completed, they get moved by marketing into this folder. We don't move any folders ourselves, but once they're in this folder, then Kelly has to make sure that they're properly done, and then she'll move them on to the next step, which is Completed Dave. In Completed Dave, this is where Dave Nevins, our CEO, So for example, if you are working on a property and it's not currently in the floor plans folder, please send a note to Kelly Dorval and myself, CC'd, and she will be the one that creates the folder for that property. So again, we are just accessing the marketing server to drop in our information. We are not in charge of creating or moving any of the marketing folders because then it changes everything in their department. So imagine that everything from this folder in the server is linked elsewhere, like an InDesign or an X-Reference in CAD. We don't want to go disturb any folders without speaking first with Kelly. Just keep that in mind. So earlier when I was talking about the information tags that are listed here, for example, 721 is listed as not started, which is pretty self-explanatory. 722 says the project has been started, but there's mapping that is required. Mapping refers to BOMA in terms of the audit, which I will show you next, something in the audit came out as we assume that they were all typical units, but there is an atypical unit that requires further mapping. That's what that would mean. Where it says 725 started, confirmation required, well, that refers to the audit is complete and maybe a PM needs to authenticate whether or not the information listed is correct. Because when we go in and we fill out all the information in the audit, some units may come out as they're no longer 1 beds, they're 2 beds, or the unit has increased in square footage and we have it, we just need the PM to sign off on it. A project that says branded require confirmation. Branded or branding refers to the in-design of the property. So once everything is completed through the audit, which is an Excel document, the next step of the project will be to drop in all the plotted PDF typical floor plans or atypical floor plans that we've created into an InDesign file, and then export that into PDFs that marketing can issue to the sales agents. Okay. So this is a folder that I'll use as an example. It's a property in Montreal. It's property 765, which I did myself a little while ago. Within each of the folders, you should create, and this is the only time we'll be creating folders, is a folder called branded floor plans and a folder called PDF plans. Now in the PDF plans, you will put all of the plans that you created for that property. So all the unit types, as well as all the floor plans. So if it's the ground floor, the typical floor, the penthouse floor, any floors that have units on them, just for this, okay? If a floor is just mechanical or a basement and there are no units on it, you do not need to put it in this folder, okay? So within this property, I've put in all of the unit types. Now I'm gonna zoom in here. The way that I have named all the units is the property code. So in this case, 765, I put in brackets the 1, the 2, the 3 to identify that this is the 01, the 02, the 03, the 04, whatever. But then you see here the marketing tag, which is 1A, 1G, 2C, 2D, right? So these tags are what we then issue to marketing as the marketing tag. So you should all remember this Excel. So you should all remember this Excel. I've shared it with you in the past. All you need to do is create a new Excel doc and copy paste this information from our audit into a clean folder and just a clean Excel folder, and just rename it with the property address hyphen unit types. So in this case, 765 is 1025 Sherbrooke hyphen unit types. And in this, we put in all of the BOMA numbers, right? So the typical units 1 through 15 in this case, the apartment type, whether it's a 3.5 1 bed, a 4.5 2 bed, a studio, or a 5.5, which is a 3-bedroom unit, right? You write down all the square footage that you've already calculated as the living square footage. And then you also indicate all the BOMA square footage, which you've already taken. Please jot down if there's an existing dishwasher in the unit or a washer dryer and patio. In case of confusion, let's say you've already measured all the units and you've identified that, let's say, for example, in this case, the 9 and the 14 are very similar, but the 9 is a different unit type because the kitchen is different than the 14. Please indicate that as a note. Or if there's a feature that isn't listed as dishwasher, washer, dryer, patio, like a second bathroom, please indicate that as a note as well. These notes are really helpful for marketing because then they understand why we've identified, in this case, the 9 and the 14 are two different unit types, right? So in here, all of these identifications, it's very simple. It always starts off with a number, either a 0, a 1, or a 2, sometimes a 3. So that refers to the number of bedrooms in the apartment. If it's a 0, it's a studio. If it's a 1, it's a 1 bed. If it's a 2, it's a 2 bed. Now, when you've mapped out all the floor plans, you will know if there is multiple studios on that floor, multiple 1 bedrooms, and multiple 2 beds or 3 beds. The identification that you will give refers actually to which plan, right? So in this case, this is Studio A. So 0A. A refers to this is the first type of studio, but there could be multiple 0As, right? Because the same plan gets copied on the same floor. In case the studio changes, then you would have a 0B. That you see a lot more often with 1A, and then you have 1B, 1C, 1D, and so on, right? The same applies to 2. So 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D. In most of the cases, these unit tags are information that we're actually going to pull from the marketing server first. In the odd case where I've actually asked you to create the room tags, then yes, you will input this information first. But we will always refer firstly to the marketing audit to get this information. The marketing audit is an Excel document that has been created by Kelly. So it's listed as an Excel, and it's the name given to it is the property code. So let's open it up and look at it. The marketing audit. So once you've opened the Excel document that is named the property code, this document should have already been created. If not, please speak with Kelly. Identify who has done the audit, so write your name, you can replace mine. And this may seem like a very daunting Excel, but we will walk through it together. So none of this information should be inputted. It should be blank. You will be inputting the model and the floor plan and the comments section. This folder has already been done by me, and that's the example that I'm showing you as what it would look like once completed. But typically, these 3 columns, the model, the floor plan, and the comments columns, are left blank because this is the information that we're going to fill in. Okay? So let's look at a typical floor plan. So in this property, there are 15 units per floor. So let's just look at the 301 to the 315s. In our system, we've already identified these units by a type. And these are the numbers that we were talking about here, right? So if you identify the base types, copy this information into this Excel. So always refer back to what has already been done in the audit. If the O1 is listed as a 1A, that is your starting off point for that. Always refer back to what has already been described as the unit type. If it has not been created, that is an instance where I will ask you to name them. Let's say a property is brand new and everything is listed as a 1A, but we know there are 2 beds, there's a studio. In that case, these identifications need to be changed. We do not change this information. This is why we do the audit. So in terms of the 01 to the 15 type, these are the square footages that come out in our system. Our point is to validate that the right plan is associated to the 01 typical. So if you identify all the floor plans as this is the 1A, this is the 1F, you will then go into what you've drafted to confirm that this is correct. And you will write in this information. So always write the property code 0765 in this case, and you've confirmed it for a 1A. There's a floor plan, so you write yes. And here, we're gonna write the living square footage. In this instance, we're only going to indicate the living square footage because marketing will have access to the other Excel, which has both the living and the BOMA square footages as you've described, right? But we're just confirming whether or not the right identification has been given to the typical 01, the 02, and so on. So let's say in this instance, you've drawn the 02 and they've identified it as 1F. But you know, based off of your plan, that 1F is also an 05. So you need to confirm that the 02 and the 05 are 2 of the same unit types or they're different. And in this case, they're actually different. So the 02, when I drafted it, I realized it's not the same as the 05. So I needed to create a new room tag for it, 1G. Okay, so in that case, the moment you type in a different code than what is here, the Excel will highlight it as red. And that will tell Kelly, this needs to be changed in our system. You've identified a unit type that is different. So again, if you've identified these 15 are your typical unit types, it's easy if you just create like a map on paper and write 01 is listed as 1A, 02 is listed as 1F, 03 2C, and so on. And then when you confirm that with your actual plans, you'll see, okay, well, in this case, the 03 and the 04 are listed both as 2C. Are they the same based off of the floor plans that you've drafted? And when I say the same, I mean, are they really the same layout? Are they copies or are they mirrors of one another? If a kitchen is slightly different in terms of there's an extra cabinet, that is not different enough to justify having a different unit type. If a unit has an additional bedroom, that's a different unit type, right? This gets confusing because the server identifies them as the same unit because the square footage is the same. And when you look at it in terms of what's on paper, they should be the same, right? But when you look at the actual floor plan and you've identified, actually, there's a 2D version of this plan because there's something very different about the 04 compared to the 03, okay? So always identify what has been given to you in terms of information, and then look at all the plans and actually ask yourself, is the 01 and the 14 and the 15, are they all the same, right? In this case, they're listed as 1A, 1C, and 1D. So are the 1 beds, have they, So once you've identified all of the unit types that have been given to you and you confirm whether or not they are identical, that in the case of the O1 to the 15, it is really a 1A, 1F, 2C, 2C. Once you've confirmed this information and you've come up with, oh, there's a little bit of an issue, that is not the same plan, it is a different plan. You will identify all these types over here in the unique column, where you just list the 15 or let's say 6, depending on how many units you have that are typical in the building. You'll identify the base codes here, right? And then you'll say, yes, they have been drawn. Once you have your 15 or so, again, in this case, there are 15 units per floor, so that's specific only to this property. But let's say once you have all your typicals and you've identified them by unit type, you can just copy paste this information as you go down in the row. Now, let's always try to make sure that we're not copy pasting information where it doesn't belong. So make sure when you copy your typicals and you paste them that you are identifying the same unit types, right? So the O1 to the 15 on the floor above or below, right? Because sometimes, as you will see in the audit, this is what I refer to as the audit, right? Let's say on a particular floor, on the 6th floor, there is no O3. The O2 and the O3 have been merged into one unit. So it goes O2 to O4. So if you're copy pasting that information, just be aware. If something comes up highlighted, please confirm that it is in fact accurate. That again, this comes up as highlighted as an example, the O4, they say it's a 2C, but we know it's a 2D. Yes, it's confirmed. And then I write the living square footage. Always be aware, especially as you go through this quickly, when you start copy pasting information, always make sure that the information that comes out in red is accurate. Because we're telling Kelly, okay, well now you need to go back in the system and make sure that this is now changed to a 1 from an OB to an OA plan. And if we're making her do that, we need to make sure that that information is correct in the first place, right? And that can easily be a distraction if you copy or write the code improperly the first time, or you've copy pasted it into the wrong unit type. But if it is in fact correct that you're identifying this as a different unit type and you've confirmed it, indicate as yes, it's been confirmed, this is the square footage, and Kelly will go back in and change it when she has time. We're doing all of this specifically because we're doing all of this work to identify all the units that are different, right? In terms of what we identified it in the server as this is the unit type that we're describing it as, but is it really the same? Yes or no, right? So if in case you see that what you've identified as a 2-bed is actually a 1-bedroom, that is a much bigger issue than if it's just a 2-bed version A to a 2-bed version B, right? If there's an additional bedroom, that is where you need to write in this column here, requires PM or marketing to review, right? You just write that to be reviewed so that Kelly knows right off the bat that something really fishy was pulled out in the audit, that we've identified an atypical unit. And atypical units, as you've already known, are units that don't conform to what is above and what is below. An atypical unit could be a unit build out from either us or a previous management company where they've turned a space into an apartment and it doesn't match what is above and below. Or a unit that has been merged or split. In the case that the unit has been merged, it would be like two units that are next to one another that have been merged into one, or a unit that has been divided. In the case that the plan shows that the unit has not changed in terms of square footage, it does not require a plan. If the unit has increased in terms of square footage, then it justifies our work to go back in and remeasure a unit from scratch. And already off the bat, you already know what it's like to measure an atypical unit. They really do not look like the units that are above or below, right? So in the case that somebody comes back and says, well, that's really a 3-bedroom, but you've listed it as a 2-bedroom, you already know the answer to that because the system, we've listed it as, there's an indication that somebody has turned it into a 3-bed, but we know that the square footage is actually still a 2-bedroom unit. The potential renter, the resident of the unit, has closed in a living room or a dining room and turned it into a bedroom. But that is not a standard floor plan. And typically, once we regain possession of the unit after the resident leaves, we restore the unit back to its original configuration. So therefore, it does not justify us having to create a new unit type for that specific instance. But if a unit has been merged, where two units have been added together, that is an atypical unit. Clearly because there would be 2 bathrooms and a kitchen that has been demolished and you've added additional square footage, right? So it always comes back to, is the square footage the same or has it increased for atypical units? So as you move through the audit, you'll see that it gets less and less daunting, right? Once you've identified your base unit types and you've confirmed whether or not they are in fact what is in the system or what we're identifying as this needs to change because it isn't in fact a copy or a mirror, once you have your base unit types, you can just copy and paste throughout. Again, as I mentioned, please be aware if there's a unit on a floor that doesn't exist, because then it changes your copy paste, right? Always be aware, read through every column, make sure that it is in fact correct. I cannot stress that enough. But as you go through it, you'll see that this actually becomes less daunting, and you'll get faster and faster as you go on through each property. So once this is complete, the audit is done. So you save your Excel and you move on to the next property.